shadow in the crowd. Greg Harper wasn't the kind of guy who liked excitement. After spending 15 years as a cop in the city, he'd had enough of chaos, enough of unpredictability. Now, he was content with the quiet, steady life of a security guard at Paramount Plaza, high-end office building in the heart of downtown. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was easy. All he had to do was sit in front of a wall of security monitors, watch the comings and goings of office workers, and report anything unusual. And nothing unusual ever happened. At least, not until that night. It was a Friday, and the building was emptier than usual. Most people had left early to kickstart their weekends. Greg leaned back in his chair, his eyes lazily sweeping over the monitors, catching glimpses of the cleaning crew and a few stragglers still working late. His shift was almost over, and he was ready to head home to his small apartment, crack open a beer, and forget about the world for a while. That's when he saw it. At first, it was nothing out of the ordinary, just a man, standing in the lobby with a group of people leaving the building, but something about him caught Greg's attention. He wasn't moving. While the others were talking, laughing, and walking out of the building, this guy was just standing there, watching. Greg frowned and leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The man was wearing a long, dark coat, his face mostly hidden beneath a hood. He stood with an unnatural stillness, as though he were frozen in place. And then, just as the last of the group walked out of the frame, the man turned very slowly and looked directly into the security camera. A chill ran down Greg's spine. He hadn't moved. He hadn't flinched or reacted. But somehow, he knew that the man had seen him. It was as if he was looking right through the screen, right at Greg. Greg checked the other cameras, scanning the feeds for the man. Nothing. He was gone, a little unsettled. Greg shook his head and leaned back in his chair, convincing himself it was just some guy being weird. The rest of the night was quiet. Over the weekend, Greg didn't think much about the man in the lobby. He wrote it off as a strange moment and forgot about it. But when he came back to work on Monday, he saw him again. This time, the man was standing in the crowd near the front of the building. Dozens of employees were walking through the lobby, grabbing coffee, chatting with co-workers. And there he was, standing off to the side, his hood pulled low over his face, watching. Greg felt a familiar unease crawl up his spine. He switched to another camera, then another, trying to keep his eyes on the man. But just like before, when Greg returned to the first screen, he was gone. For the next few days, Greg couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every so often, he'd spot the man on the monitors, always in a crowd, always standing still, always watching. No one seemed to notice him. He never interacted with anyone, never moved, just stood there, blending into the background like a shadow. By Friday, Greg was on edge. He couldn't stop thinking about the man. He had asked some of the cleaning staff if they had noticed anything unusual, but no one had seen anything out of the ordinary. Greg even reviewed hours of footage from the lobby, but the man never appeared on the recordings. It was like he didn't exist. He only showed up when Greg was watching live. That night, after most of the building had emptied out, Greg found himself staring at the monitors again, waiting for something to happen. His coffee sat untouched on the desk, forgotten. His fingers drummed nervously on the armrest of his chair. Hours passed with nothing. But then, just before the end of his shift, he saw the man again. This time, he wasn't in a crowd. He was alone, standing in the middle of the lobby, facing the camera. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared. Greg's heart pounded in his chest as he reached for the phone to call building security. But before he could dial, the lights in the lobby flickered and then went out. All the monitors went black. Greg stood up, heart racing. The power outage only lasted a second or two, but when the lights flickered back on, the man was gone. Damn it, Greg muttered under his breath. He grabbed his flashlight and headed for the lobby, his pulse racing. As he approached the glass doors leading into the main atrium, his footsteps echoed in the empty hall. The lobby was eerily quiet, the only sound coming from the soft hum of the building's air conditioning. He stepped inside, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the polished marble floor. Nothing, no sign of anyone. Just as he turned to leave, something caught his eye: movement in the far corner of the lobby. He swung the flashlight round, his heart pounding. There he was, the man in the hood, but now he wasn't standing still. He was walking slowly, deliberately toward Greg. His face was still obscured by the hood, but there was something off about the way he moved. His steps were too slow, too methodical, like a predator stalking its prey. Greg backed up, his hand instinctively reaching for the baton clipped to his belt. "Hey, stop right there," he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty lobby. The man didn't stop. He kept moving forward, closing the distance between them. "Last warning," Greg barked, gripping the baton tightly. The man stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, very slowly, The man lifted his head, revealing his face beneath the hood. Greg's blood ran cold. It wasn't a face at all, where there should have been eyes, a nose, a mouth. There was nothing. Just smooth, featureless skin, like a mannequin's. No expression, no humanity. Greg took a step back, his breath coming in shallow gasps. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a trick, a mask, something. But then the thing tilted its head, as if studying Greg, and without warning, it lunged. Greg barely had time to react. He swung the baton wildly, but it passed through the figure like smoke. His heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. The figure advanced, its faceless head looming closer. Panicking, Greg scrambled to his feet and ran. He bolted through the lobby, his footsteps echoing off the marble floor, and didn't stop until he reached the security office. Slamming the door shut, he locked it and backed away, breathing hard. He turned to the monitors, half expecting to see the faceless man still chasing him. But the screens were blank. The lobby was empty. There was no sign of him. For a moment, Greg stood there, his heart racing, his mind spinning. Had it been real, or had he imagined it all? But then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed something on one of the screens, a figure standing in the far corner of the lobby, watching, waiting. Greg's blood turned to ice. He wasn't imagining it. The thing was real, and it wasn't going to stop. It was coming for him, and it wasn't alone.